All right, so we're gonna start off with Lumion, the fun stuff. I think you guys have all seen the video of Lumion 8 coming out, which looks pretty amazing. Uh, and to my knowledge, everything we're gonna do right now should transcend into Lumion 8. I think the concepts are all gonna be the same. There might be some other different tweaks, and if there are, once I get my hands on it, we can revisit it and do another uh, video as well if for anything that is different. Um, so we're going to start off in SketchUp as you see, and I can't remember if we've talked about it before, but if not, this tab here, if you see it, this is my Lumion tab. If you guys have ever wondered what this is for, uh, when you import a SketchUp file into Lumion, it only brings in visible layers. So any layer that's off, it doesn't bring in, which we're going to use to our advantage. So as you see, I have lots of vegetation in here right now, and we are going to don't want to bring that into Lumion because we want to use Lumion's vegetation. So I want all of that turned off. And I think I have a couple of other layers like my entourage and just a couple other things that are turned off. And I actually have a layer in here called Lumion off, which I believe for the most part is turned on in every scene except for Lumion. And really this is something of a wild card layer in that it's something that you want to have in your model in SketchUp, but you just don't want to bring it into Lumion because you're going to do something else in Lumion. I don't use it a lot, but I have used it, and so it's just something to be aware of that you can use this particular layer for your layer controls, and when you want to bring in Lumion, so that when you click Lumion layer, it will turn this off as well as some other things. So with that said, we are going to click on my Lumion layer. And the camera view doesn't matter. Lumion doesn't import camera views. So it really doesn't matter where you are as far as in the model. Yeah, actually, here you go. This is a great, great piece to use. So in SketchUp, I want to show, I'm pretending we're on like a beachfront right now. And so I want to show the ocean coming in. But I don't want to bring this ocean into Lumion because I want to use Lumion's ocean. I do have water here for the pool, and I want to leave that, but I don't want the ocean. So I'm actually going to add this ocean to my Lumion off. And so now when I go back to any other scene, you can see my ocean is on, but when I click on Lumion, my ocean goes off. So that's just a great example of how and why I use that layer and why I use this Lumion tab. It's because now I need to save this file. So I'm just hitting Control S to save it. So it is important to save your SketchUp model in the layer state setup that you want Lumion to import. So jumping into Lumion. So again, I'm sure you guys have all played around with it for just a little bit at least, and I'm to some degree familiar with these very beginning steps, but obviously for recording purposes, we'll go through the whole thing. And as a side note, as you guys know, we did get our laptop back, and I tested it out a couple days ago with Lumion, pushed it through some pretty good steps, and everything worked fine. So the laptop is now functioning with Lumion. So if anybody wants to practice this stuff, that laptop is available, and Lumion should not crash anymore. So coming in, you have these different start scenes. Just a plain sunset, night, mountain spring, mountain range. For Florida, we really don't need anything other than a plane. And really, All of these just have some settings tweaked. I mean, I guess other than starting a mountain spring, instead of having to build it, you have it there, but we don't do those very much at all. So I typically just start with this plane. And so we will jump right in, and you see we have beautiful grass and sky. Um, so just going through some of the basic motions of stuff, we have just to go through some of the navigation stuff to start with. You see here on the left, we have these icons that hide, but when you get near it, they pop out. And you have weather, landscaping, materials, and objects. And then down here is really how we control all of that stuff. On this side, this is going to be more about our exporting, photos, movies, VR stuff, and going back to build mode. And you can control settings here and that sort of stuff. So we'll click on weather just to show you. And this is great for when you're building the model. You can adjust the weather, but you really don't need to worry about the weather settings a whole lot. Simply because when we go into photo and or video mode, you can and should add an effect where you control the sun within each individual shot. This way you can control where the sun is, versus having this global setting. But it's just more to be aware that this is here, so if you're building a model and just want to see how it looks, it's easy enough to control. So this one here is simply the height of your sun. So we can go from high noon all the way down to sunset. And what's cool is you see how this all just updates live by your control, or we can go all the way down to a pure night scene. And there's our moon. So we come back up, and then you see we have a compass, and this controls where the sun is. In fact, I'm gonna put the sun a little lower. So you see our sun is sitting right here in the upper right. So as I move this around, so this is basically moving the sun around 360 degrees to put it wherever you want to get the shadow lines that you're looking for. So obviously if I go south, then the sun is directly behind us. North, it's directly in front of us. East and west to the right and left. So that's how you control weather. And again, you can control clouds in here. And again, I really wouldn't worry about it because you're going to do this once we get into taking photos, that you can control the clouds for individual photos. I think it's much easier and better that way. This slider just changes the amount. So see, if I go all the way up, it becomes a completely cloudy day. Drop it all the way down, it's a completely cloudless day. But we'll just leave it in the middle just for this, for these purposes. And then here you can change the type of clouds, and there's there's 9 different presets here that you can choose. And again, I've never really used this because I control it differently, but it's just something to be aware of if for your use. This is controlling the brightness of the sun. I'm going to change my clouds a little bit and move my sun so we can see it. So you can see if I pull this all the way up, it makes for a very bright scene. Drop it all the way down, it makes for a very dim scene. And I haven't done much testing with this, if this has any effects on shadows. I think that actually be a pretty good one to mess around with. So anyway, that's weather. We'll jump into landscaping, and there's lots of cool stuff here. And you can control topography in here, but the way it was explained to me, and it's a great way to explain it, is any topography that you make inside of Lumion should be big, broad strokes, not the site-specific topography. All of that should be modeled, because it's very difficult to create very specific topography within Lumion. But if you need to create like a mountain range or kind of going in reverse, a river or something like that. I'm going to get a little bit more aerial here, just to kind of show you. So we have the buttons here are rise, lower, flatten, jitter, and smooth. And you can control brush size, and you can see as I increase it, my I guess sphere of influence, if you want to call it, will increase. And then my brush speed. So I'm just going to go ahead and on this lower brush, start going. I'm going to left click and hold down and just start dragging around. And you'll see that I can start building a mountain just like that. And what's cool is this particular texture, this grass texture, you can set somewhere you can set the angle at which grass will no longer grow and stone will appear. So you can actually change it so this is all covered in grass, but since these are very steep changes here, you can see that it's now showing rock, and it kind of slowly goes away as you get down to the side here where it's a little flattened out. Now if I change the brush speed, you may not see this as well live, but when you play with it, you'll see it. If I click, this actually grows mountains very quickly. Like barely holding it, and this thing just shoots up. So you can see that it's you can create some nice mountain ranges in the background, or whatever you need to with this, but doing specific topography adjustments would be kind of difficult. And just to show now, if I grab the flatten, what this is going to do is going to try and average out these tops to create a flattened top, so that you can build your house on top of. And that's really what that does. Jitter will try and create something a little bit more irregular versus like smooth hills. And so you can see that you just kind of do some quick clicking that is creating these more I never remember the terms, the stalactites versus stalagmites, the ones that grow up, and the ones versus the ones that grow down. But anyway, it creates these very like sharp cone jittery kind of shapes, and that's what the jitter does. Smooth, as you can imagine, would do the exact opposite. It'll smooth out those edges. So you can easily have lots of fun with this stuff and making whatever fits your project. But again, to get a sense of scale, I have no idea how tall these are, no idea of any of that stuff. So it's just really meant to do these broader strokes. If you needed to really create, say, a river, you can actually do the reverse. If you see, I'm now clicked on this lower where I was on the raise. I'm now on lower, and I'm going to carve out a river. And it's something we'll get into a little bit more later. Where is it? So now I just placed a water plane, if you will, and I'm just going to stretch it so it covers, the piece that I carved, and then I don't use this one a whole lot. But I'm trying to remember where I can lower this. I think actually landscape. There we go. I think you just have to place it where you want. I'm sure there's a way to do it. Again, I don't really use this, but either way, you can see that you can create a river this way. I personally would still almost do this in SketchUp and just add have a water plane in there that you can use. It's just easier to control that kind of stuff. Those things that are more specific to your project. But it's just more want to show you what was capable. If if I delete that, I can actually turn on ocean. Where's my, there's the delete. So if I go from water to now ocean, and you see this is the on and off button. So I'm going to turn ocean on. This now, instead of creating just an individual plane, will create an ever expansive ocean. And so the only thing you really need to be aware of now is that you would just drop the height, because this is going to put the ocean directly at the ground plane. So you either need to build the ground plane up or lower the water. I mean, really, it's one and the same. So I'm just going to drop this down. And if you've ever tried to use these sliders on some of this stuff, this water really jumps and it's hard to get precise measurements. You can actually, if you hold the shift key, instead of going these big jumps, it'll actually start doing more micro jumps. And so now I can really control the height of the water much more specifically. And there's my water filling in anything that's lower than grade level. And then all this stuff just does exactly what it says. It just changes the quality of the water. Like the wave intensity really changes the speed. You're not getting a great sense of it with the delay that's coming across, but it's the stuff that you can play with. So you can change the intensity, the speed. The turbidity is the clarity of the water. You can change which direction the wind's blowing in, which in turn changes with the direction the waves are blowing. Color presets, all that good kind of stuff. You can really control it. This is actually a pretty cool one. So on the ground here, if I don't want grass coming right up to my river, I can actually click on this paintbrush, and similar to the way that we were carving out the landscaping, we can add in dirt. Like I'm gonna choose this one here, which is more of like a dirt versus beach sand, and you can change your brush size and the speed of the brush. And so I can now just start painting on the ground. And so it's going to change that grass to this, to this dirt. I can grab, maybe I'll change my brush size and grab this more of like beachy kind of sand and paint something here. So it's kind of cool that you can really start, depending on how much time you want to spend on it, really start creating a very specific type of landscaping that you want to do. And each one of these, if you click that arrow, there's all kinds of presets that you can choose between rocks or farmland, gravels, all kinds of stuff. And even different grasses that you can choose. And so anyway, that's painting landscape. This is OpenStreetMaps, which is kind of cool. I don't use it a ton. It doesn't really help us a whole lot with our sites. And it's something that maybe I'll show later. But what it does is it'll import roads and water and trees and buildings for your surrounding site. It works very well for somewhere like New York City, but may not work for some client's lot that he just bought down the street, that kind of thing. Grass is going to be a lot like the ocean, where it has an on-off button. Before I turn it on, maybe I'll get a little lower, get down here. And you can see that our grass right now is pretty flat. It's just this painted on texture. But if I turn it on, it instantly becomes this three-dimensional grass. In fact, I'll change the grass height and make it really tall, so you can see the grass that we have just sitting there. The grass size is like I guess the size of the blades of grass, not necessarily the height. It just changes the grass in and of itself. So you can really get like a nice fine grass for like a golf course or a thick grass for a bush, and then change the height as well. And if you really want to get fancy with your grass, you can add in these like weeds or rocks or whatever, where you can say I want this type of weed in here, and you can see it now in the background. It just added these weeds sporadically in here, and just like so many other things, you can just change the spreading, you can change the size of them, the random size, so some will be big, some will be small, uh, that kind of stuff. And you can add as many of these things in as you want. You can add stones in here that are randomly around. Um, so again, say that again. Correct. These stones are just randomly placed. They're not yours. So again, going back to that, what I said previously, that all of this kind of topo stuff is great for the broader stroke setting. But if you have a very specific control that you need to have over your project, then you would model it in SketchUp and bring it in. And you know, even add the stones into your SketchUp model, and just add a texture to them and all that good kind of stuff. You know, where you have a very specific rock garden or whatever it is you want. Um, but it's just more be aware that there's all these like broader stroke capabilities um, on your project. That's all. And even though you're only seeing it, I'm zooming out right now, you're only seeing it in this little bit. That's just part of the uh, capability of Lumion that helps speed up live renderings, that it only shows it for a certain distance, but as you zoom, so see if I zoom into these back areas, they just keep filling in with this kind of stuff. So even though you're only seeing it in an area, it's done globally across the whole project. Materials we'll get into, and objects I can show you here, but we'll get into this more as well. So objects, there's a whole host of objects that are built into Lumion, and they're great. But you can also build your own and bring them in. Where for the most part, you're going to build your SketchUp model and bring your SketchUp model in, and we're about to do that. But you can also build, if you have a boulder that you built in SketchUp or a rock or whatever, you can actually bring those in as individual files inside of Lumion. Like you can have as many SketchUp files brought into Lumion and control them independently of each other. Because when you bring a SketchUp file in, there's no editing of it. It's looking at that SketchUp file as one cohesive unit. You can't move anything within the SketchUp file. But if you bring in multiple SketchUp files, you can move those around individually. So again, if you bring a rock in, you can move your SketchUp rock that you modeled anywhere in the model that you want and make copies of it and all that good kind of stuff. So we'll definitely show more of that later as well. I'm thinking today I really just want to show the basics and get everything running. And if you guys are up for it, I think maybe we'll do another class next week instead of skipping a week, and do the more advanced stuff in Lumion as well, because I know you guys are really interested and excited about this. So to show you what's inside of Lumion, you have down here, these are your categories that you can choose from. The nature of the cars and the people are the one that I use the most. There are outdoor stuff that I just don't use a whole lot of this, because there's not, you know, there's always such specific things that you're looking for, and there's only so many things they can put in here. But they do have a lot of nice indoor stuff as well. But even then, I would still rather in SketchUp either find the chair I need or model the chair I need, and you can bring that chair in as its own component and build your tablescape with chairs wherever you want, rotated wherever you want. And they're not, because even looking at this, I'll just open this up real quick. So you select on the category you want. So in this case, I'm going to select indoor. And then if you go here, this box here, this will open up a bigger menu. And so once you're in this bigger menu, there's then additional levels of categories. And then under each category, just so you know, there are additional pages. So this one you see has 2 pages and we're on the first page. What's nice is something like the fan. If I bring this in, let me move this up and I'll get into all the move controls later. I think you can actually, these fans will actually, you can have them on. They will rotate. What am I looking for? Not a big deal. I know I've done it before where they will actually spin. So if you do a video, the fans will be moving versus bringing in your own fan, which will be static. So it's just one of those things to be aware of. But again, there's only so many fans that they have here that may or may not fit your, oh, here we go. They have the same fan, but one spins and one doesn't. That's what it is. So here you go. So, and again, you'll see it spinning a little bit where you are because of the delay, but you can see that it is spinning. Again, which is kind of nice to add a little bit of a dynamic feel to videos. But anyway, going back into here, so going to, I think, furniture. Yeah, so we'll go to seating. I mean, there are 4 pages, but of all the furniture in the world, there's only so much they can put in here. So some of this stuff may or may not work for what you're looking for. And so if it does, great. But if not, then again, I think it's just better off finding something and bringing it in. But the nice thing about these is these are modeled and textured to be optimized for Lumion. Let me see here. I think there is. Yeah, here we go. So if I select this, I can use. Sometimes there's not all of them, but some of them have the capability, if you edit, that they will. You can change the color of the chair. Not all of them are set up that way. And one other little thing, I just in case you guys didn't know, each item has its own node, and that's how you have to interact with it. You know, you can only grab it by its node. It's not like AutoCAD or SketchUp. And the whole grabbing things and moving around the model definitely take a little bit of time getting used to. Everything about this program is so self-explanatory, except for moving and grabbing things. But on that, if I use my move tool, you can see I can move this around. And if I believe it's Alt, if I hold the Alt key and then move, you see it makes a copy of it, which you'll see in a second. So that's really nice. So you can make, and that's really gets great with trees and all that kind of stuff. So, you know, getting back to the point, there's, you know, some of these libraries are limited just by the nature of what they are, and that's why I typically don't use them, or I really stick with just trees, cars, and people. And so with that, we'll get into trees just to grab something. And you can see there's lots of different trees and lots of different pages for each kind of tree. And this search tool works really well. So if you're looking for an oak tree, you can just type in oak, and it'll bring up all the oak trees, and you can see I have 3 pages of oak trees. So I'm just going to grab one, and now it's basically loaded into my menu, so you see it right there. So I can place it, and there's our beautiful tree. And if I have, oops, let me go to this topography. What's nice is it knows the ground, and so it'll place it properly. So if I place one at the bottom of the hill, it works, and if I place one at the top of the hill, it works. And if I zoom in, you see that it actually buries it and it doesn't have like this weird thing sticking out. Um, it actually looks really good placed inside there. And what's even what else cool? Like if I can left click and place one at a time. If I think it's control. Yes, if I control, I'm pressing control right now, and then control click. You see right here, it says shortcut place 10 copies of current model, and it'll just randomly place 10 of those trees all at once. So it's a good way to start making a forest. And to grab stuff, I'm going to deselect everything. To grab stuff, you have to use, to me, it's an awkward thing between this place mode and move mode. But this, you have to come here and be on move mode, and then you can select over all the ones that you want to move. It's just a little awkward, and it's just a different way of thinking than most programs, so it takes a little bit of getting used to. But what is nice is now if I want to move all 10 of these trees, I use my move tool, and as I start going up this mountain, you see that these trees are sliding up the mountain and will be properly placed in their height orientation with where the ground is. So that was moving all of the trees all at once, and you can see they're all sitting properly, which is, again, really nice. One more thing about placing things. So I can come back here and say place object, and this will go back to placing 1. Clicking control will place 10. Or I can use this line tool, which is called mass placement. And what this will allow me is, let me go across my river. I'm going to draw a line from here to, let's say, here. And when I click once to start, click once to end. When I do that, if you can see it, they're a little small right now, but you can see, in fact, let me exit out of this. I'm going to zoom in a little bit just so it's not so big. But you can do this as large as you need to and as many as you need to. But I'm going to go from here to here, and it's telling me this is, 60 meters. I think I can change this to feet somewhere, but I don't really measure things in here. And it plopped in, was that 5 trees. So you see I have this tree, which was the one that was already selected, and I have 5 of them across. With this slider, I can change that number all the way up to 100. So it's now placing 100 trees across. And what's nice, if I zoom in a little more, you see that the sizes have varied. So it's not like copying 100 trees in SketchUp where every tree looks exactly identical. But if you look at this, you can see these are all the same direction, and you do see a little bit of a pattern. Let's see if my mouse will follow along. Even right here, you can see this black line, because these are all the same position. I can click randomize direction, and this will start spinning all those trees in different directions depending on the tree. And right now, every tree is perfectly spaced apart. I'm going to reduce the number of trees just so we can see this a little better. They're all perfectly spaced apart. Now, if I use this one, this will randomly space them along the line. And lastly, they're all in a perfect line right now, where if you want to do a very formal layer of trees, that's what you want. But in, say, maybe creating a forest, I can randomize the offset. So this will move them away from my center point line randomly in either direction. So very quickly, you can start creating this very random forest, which is really nice. I can also spin all the trees by using this direction, and just control the exact look I want to get. So that's placing items, and that's really the big gist of the overall for Lumion. Let's get into importing our model. I'm going to go to Files, and I'm going to start a new one and start a new scene. So I'm back to where we started from. And to bring a model in, just like we would a tree, we do have this category here, which is imports, and this is how we bring in our own models. So I'm going to come here and say, click on this one here, which is import new model. And we're just going to navigate to where our file is. No, you can, it brings in 2017. You don't have to down save anything. Sometimes when SketchUp releases its latest version, I've had it where there's maybe like a month window when SketchUp was just released where it doesn't recognize the newest version of SketchUp, and I have to save back to the previous year. But Lumion will, again, it's usually maybe about a month at most. Lumion will send out a patch that will then recognize the latest Lumion file or SketchUp file. So currently you do not have to down save. So now, way back when we started this class, we talked about the naming of these files, where myself included, we used to start off by calling the original one number 1, the latest one was number 2, the next one was number 3, where the most current file was the largest number. We've now, and hopefully everybody's on board with this, everybody's using this -00 so that your current file never changes names. And one of the reasons why it's an important thing to do that is bringing this into Lumion. Lumion is now linked to this file. So if you were to save this as something else, Lumion is no longer linked to that file. So the old way of saving the newest with a different name going up would no longer do that. Even though it's not a live link, it is still linked where this button right here, this circle with 2 arrows, you just click that and it knows to look for that file and will re-import the most current version of that SketchUp file. And we'll mess around with that as well and show you that. So anyway, I'm just going to double click on this and it's going to say, is this the name that you want to call it? And that's fine. There's no reason to change it. So I'm going to click yes. The only time you might want to change it is if you have, say, like, again, going back to our example of a rock, say you have rock and you want to bring that in and you want to bring another rock in but want to handle it differently, it'll tell you that there's already a file in there with that name. You can actually rename it in that window even though the SketchUp file is not any different, and it'll bring it in as its own component, if you will. So that's where that would be good. So right now, these crosshairs are saying, where do you want to place this model? And it really doesn't matter. I'm just going to plop it in anywhere. And I'm going to jump back to SketchUp real quick. Because just to be aware, if I turn my axes on, this, let's see how well you can, let me zoom out a little bit. You should be able to see, I'm going to hide this, that here's my blue axis, here's my green, and here's my red. And so this back left corner of the house is my 0, 0 placement. And so that's going to be the insertion point that's used in Lumion. It's not overly important where that is. Again, it's just something to be aware of. Other than if, say, this house was way far away from our origin, like we're just way over here, you just need to be aware that you're going to insert by this point right here, so your house is going to be way off in the distance, and it's always just best practice for your house to be right on this. And the other thing to be aware of is this is going to be your 0, 0, 0, meaning this is going to place it right on the ground, where it's going to become an issue with the pool because we have the pool going into the ground, and we'll see that in just a second. So going back to Lumion, now we have the model placed. Let me zoom out. I normally would move my model once it's placed first, but I'm going to do a material first just so you can see the issue that's arising. So if I go to materials and I click on my water pool, this is, let me back up, this is how we handle materials. And again, I'm sure you guys most know this for the most part, but you just click materials and then you click on whatever material you want. And as you see, it basically works off of material IDs. It doesn't really matter what the material is. I mean, if you really wanted to, you can just simply paint your SketchUp model every color of the rainbow. It's just going to say anything that's painted red, you can swap out with concrete, anything painted blue. So you're basically just giving material IDs. So anyway, I'm going to grab the water and I'm going to say I want nature, water, and we're going to turn water on. And so now we have water, but the issue is our water is right at ground level. And so we're not really seeing anything, and we're getting the grass right through our pool. So that's why I need to move my model up in the air. Let me, nature, water, water, and then I'm going to click my check mark because it's basically a preview right now, and if I click check mark, it's going to save that. So now I want to go back to objects because I need to move my house, and I'm going to use my move tool and circle around and grab my house, and I can either grab this, and you see I can just move it around anywhere I want. It's a little delayed on your end, but it's you know, moving in the XY directions right now. I'm not moving it in the Z. I'm only moving it in the XY. If I grab this tool down here underneath where it says change height, this one I can move in the Z axis. So you see as I move it up, our pool now looks like a pool because we're above the grass. And it's not the SketchUp grass that we brought in, it's the grass here in the background that was causing a problem. So even though we can do it that way, I'm going to undo. Even though we can do it that way, the little bit of a better way is I'm going to, again, grab this, and instead of using these tools and manually moving it around where I want, I'm just going to come here and change the position. Though be aware that the XYZ axis is weird in Lumion. I don't know why it's done this way, because I'm used to XY being horizontal and Z being the vertical, but apparently here the X and the Z are horizontal and the Y is vertical. So I'm going to make the X 0, the Z 0, and you can see what I'm talking about, that my in fact, I'm going to move this back real quick just so you see what I'm talking about. So this blue dot is my 0, 0, 0 inside of SketchUp, which is essentially my insertion point. This set of axes is Lumion's 0, 0, 0. And so I can align those two, and that's why I'm going to change the X to 0 and the Z to 0. And then I'm going to change my Y, which is my vertical. I'm just going to type in 10. And so that's going to raise it up in the air pretty good. 10 is just a number I use. You can really use whatever you want, just as long as it's enough. I mean, this is putting 10 meters in the air, which is pretty high, but I'm not really too worried about that. If we wanted, we could probably even get away with, say, 2 meters. But the important part is that if we ever have anything else we wanted to bring in, if we go back to our SketchUp file and we draw something else, if we keep that same insertion point and then manually change those numbers, then we are always going to have everything aligned properly, if that makes sense. The biggest example I can think of that we don't really do, if you guys have ever heard of 4D animation, where construction companies use this, where they create an animated video of how the construction process would go, you know, the foundation being built, the walls coming up, windows going in, all that kind of stuff. So what they do is instead of bringing the SketchUp model in as one model, they bring in foundation, they model the foundation, they model the windows, they model the walls. So they model each piece individually and save each one of those SketchUp files out with the same insertion point, and then they overlay them all with the same insertion point inside of Lumion so that it looks like one model, but they can control each one individually and create this animation. It's nothing you really need to worry about, and it's something I might show you guys later, not so much to create 4D animations, but to understand the more advanced principles that you can accomplish in this. And it's just, you know, the more that you know of what's capable, the more you're able to do. So now that our model is set, you can either start adding in the materials you want to add in. Well, I don't know what happened here. That's weird. Yeah, that's weird. My SketchUp model's fine. Oh, so I wonder, let me try reloading. So to reload, I'm going to save this again. So I'm in SketchUp. I know you're a little delayed, but I'm in SketchUp and I just saved again. I'm going to go back to Lumion. So I'm in move mode, and so I've selected my model. I'm going to go back to place mode, and with that, this circle with two arrows is highlighted. Sometimes it's grayed out, and that's because you either don't have it selected or you have more than just the house selected. But I want to reload this model, so I'm going to click this. And since these are linked and my file name hasn't changed, it's reloading the model right now. Yeah, still doesn't like it. Let me, I'm going to, I don't know if it's because they're components. I'm going to try something in SketchUp. I'm going to take them out of the component. So these are no longer part of the window block. Let me purge. I don't need to spend too much time trying to solve this issue because it's not overly important to what we're doing, other than I've never seen it before. Anyway, I'm saving it and back to Lumion, and I'm re-importing again. Since my model's already selected, my re-import button is already highlighted, so I just need to click it again. There we go. It must have been some issue with the component because it's working now. So great. So our model's in, and without doing a whole lot, it actually looks pretty decent. Nothing we would really use. So we can start putting materials on, but just for fun, I'm going to add in our ocean. So I'm going to go to landscape. We'll go to ocean, and we'll turn the ocean on. And the ocean's already at a decent height, but I'm just going to raise it up a little bit more. And there we go. Now, obviously, in SketchUp, you would want to model your ocean side a lot nicer. So the more detailed that you model, the better it's going to look, just like anything else. So anyway, there we go. Now, now I'm going to go to materials, and I'm going to start with grass because grass is kind of interesting. So I'm going to select my grass, and I can actually turn it into grass here. But what I want to do is, let's see, where is it? So under custom, I'm going to turn this into landscaping, and this is going to be controlled by my global grass settings that we were dealing with previously. So now if I go back to landscape grass, and we're going to turn grass on, and here's where I can change the grass size just like before. And again, just like before, I can add in uh, all of these weeds if I wanted to or whatever. And so let me just get down low just so we can see the detail of it. So now we have grass growing. Yes, so you can have different grass. So if you do it the way I just did, where let me go back to materials, and I called it landscape, not grass. This grass is controlled by the global settings. If you have more than one type of grass, you would then go to nature and say, I want it to be grass. And you can see there's all kinds of different grasses so that I can make this. Actually, it's a good question. I don't know. Yeah, you know what? I've never tried that. This is just a grass texture. It's actually not a grown grass. Um, I have a very easy way of testing that out, which I will do later and get back to you on that. Because I don't know if, you know what, I'm gonna do, back in my SketchUp model, and I'm gonna do a couple quick things. I'm going to go to draw, lines, freehand, and just for fun, I'm gonna freehand this, say this ivy growing. And I'm going to paint it with this ivy material. I'm going to pull this off the wall just a bit. So here you go. In SketchUp, it doesn't look great. It just is what it is. And let me come in here. I'm going to grab, say, this patch of grass, and let's paint it with a different grass. So now we have two grasses. So we'll test it out real quick and see what happens. So again, saving my SketchUp model. And so you can see this is what's great about keeping that model linked. So I just save it, come back into here. I'm going to exit out because I don't want to change that grass. Go to Objects. And since you see this blue dot, when the dot is blue, that means it's selected. So my house is already selected, my SketchUp model is selected, so I'm able to re-import. So I'm clicking re-import. So if you're ever not able to re-import, and if it's grayed out, it's simply because you don't have the model selected properly. And so there's, it's just going to take a little bit of getting used to figuring it out. And again, you're always welcome to call if you're having problems. So here we go. We have our main grass, which we already had turned into grown grass, and we have this new grass. So let's see what happens if I grab this new patch and I turn it into landscape. It so far makes it the same. And I don't think there is, no, it's going to be a global change. So let me, yeah, absolutely. You know what, it's something I will research. And in fact, I'm going to be meeting up with some of the Lumion people in a couple of weeks. So I will pose this question to them because they've definitely helped me out with similar type of stuff. Let's see here. It's by ground. I don't think there is. Yeah, and who knows, that might be something in Lumion 8. Yeah, I don't immediately see something that would work for that. And the reason why I think it might be something they do in, say, Lumion 8 is because in Lumion 7 they added this feature, which I love. So this ivy that we drew on the wall here that has this flat image on it, I'm going to select this, and I'm going to go to nature, and I want to add leaves to this. And so I can choose whatever kind of leaves I want, and just like that, we now have some nice ivy on the wall. Yeah. And so you see there's all kinds of presets that you can choose. And then once you get back into it, just like everything else, there's all kinds of sliders that you can really change, what kind of settings there are, like the spread, how it's spread out. I mean, again, it's the matter of whatever it is you're trying to do, what the look you're looking for. The leaf size, if I zoom in a little bit, you can see the relative leaf size to the house. If I increase it, the size of the leaf gets really big. Decrease it, it can become this super tiny kind of leaf. And then this leaves type is no different than the presets that we were looking at earlier. As you shift this, it just changes the type of preset it is. So that's all that does. And then the spread pattern offset basically, I think, creates like a randomness to it, so you can change what kind of pattern it is to really get a look that you want. So I'm going to go back to my SketchUp model, and again, if you have I'm going to do two things real quick. Let's say we have this very specific kind of hedge that we want, a nice box hedge, whatever. And I'm going to paint it with that same material. Yeah, this is actually one that comes with SketchUp, I believe. But again, in fact, you know what? I'm going to show you that it really doesn't even matter what you paint it in SketchUp, other than having your SketchUp model look good, because this material works just fine for SketchUp presenting to say, hey, this is a hedge. No problem, it works fine. But I'm going to paint this hedge red just as a color, let it be a color ID. And then I'm going to do this. I'm going to build myself a quick little tree. Let's see here. How can I do this quickly? Let me do, creating spheres in SketchUp is never the easiest thing. Let's see if I do this. Let's do that. Then over to, whoops. I'm sure there's better ways of drawing spheres, but I haven't found them. All right. Oops. So let me bring my sphere on top of my tree. And we're going to create one more, maybe a nice, like, topiary, fine, yes. Exactly. So let's see, I'm going to, in my SketchUp materials, I'm just going to grab, this part doesn't really matter, I just want to grab, I thought there was a bark texture. Is this bark? That's fencing. Again, doesn't matter, but here we go, bark. So I'm just going to paint this bark, And I'm going to paint this a vegetation color, and I'm going to paint this a different vegetation color. So there we go. We have these two trees we just created. And I'm going to save it. Come back in here and save that. Go to Objects, and I'm going to reload my model. And there we go. So if you remember, we had the one hedge that was painted the same as our ivy, and that one automatically came in since it's the same material. And then we have this other hedge that's red. I'm just going to select this and say I want you to be leaves, and I want you to be this kind of leaf, and it becomes that. So if you see, it doesn't matter what the underlying material is in Lumion. It's basically just an ID location, and that's all it is. Does that make sense? I think that's like probably the most clearest way I can show it in here. Exactly. Exactly. And again, that's why it's like a material ID. So anything that is that red becomes this. Sure. I mean, you can have, well, it's not red as in the color, it's the name of the material. Like I can have this red. So this red right here is A05. So I'll add, I'm going to create a new material. Whoops. I'm going to add new material, and I'm going to call it color A05.1. And it's going to be the exact same red. And I'll draw this bush, and I'll color it with that. So if I do an ID, you see right here, this is color A05, and if I do an ID on this one is color 051. The exact same color, but they're now different names. So if I save this, come back in here and Objects, reload. Yeah, so that's really what it's basing off of, is the name of the material. So anything that's named the same, you are exactly right, that will change. So here you can see my second red box, that now when I select this material, see how if I hover over this leaf, it says color A05. You should see in a second. It'll say color A05, but if I hover over this one, it'll say color A05.1. And I can change this into, we can make this our sculptural waterfall. So yeah, getting into our trees real quick. Well, we're way over time. This stuff's way too fun. So I'll just show you a couple other quick little things, and then we're going to jump back into this next week as well. So if I click on, this the bark, I can go to nature, and there is somewhere, is it outdoor? It might be outdoor. Somewhere there's here we go. So I can turn this into a bark. So that's a pretty, I'm zooming in on it. It's a pretty decent looking tree now. Again, for just drawing a circle and adding a material, it looks like a pretty good tree. And I can add, grab this, my sphere here that we painted. Again, just coming here, clicking leaves, and we're going to turn this into a tree. I'll grab this one, again, same thing, leaves, and we'll make this, oops, zoomed in too quick. This one will be our pine tree. Yeah. So again, if you have like this landscape plan, or like some of these modern homes where we get like these very, very specific type of landscaping, or need to create a garden maze or whatever, you can see how quick and simple it really would be that in SketchUp, you're just going to draw the rectangles, pop them up, make blocks, and then pop in the leaf material. If you guys got about another 5-10 minutes max, I'm going to show you really the materials I should be showing you, which is the house. Um, so I'm going to save all those. So we'll grab materials. And again, just clicking on glass. You can either simply click on custom glass, and then boom, you have glass. And again, you can control all the reflectivities. Like you can make this a super reflective glass, not reflective. You can change transparent, making it like an opaque. So just the same way that we did the red, where we had the exact same color red, but we named it different things, you can do the same thing with glass. You can have the exact same glass material, but name one, like glass base. And this is really Rebecca getting into our material things. I really want to have this set up, and I already have most of it set up, where we have preset glass for like glass base. We can have glass frosted. We can have glass whatever, so that in the SketchUp model, they all look the same. Maybe we have the transparency is different in SketchUp, doesn't really matter. But when you come into Lumion, those will be there that you have glass base versus glass frosted. So if those are really important to your model, you can change that kind of stuff, like the transparency to it and that sort of thing. So again, you can really change all this. Let me continue on glass. So I can actually come back and say, there's even, I think outdoor. So if I go to outdoor glass, and so this is custom glass, which just gives you really the baseline glass. And pure glass is kind of the same thing. But if you go to outdoor and add glass, there's 2 pages of what they call architectural glass. So that's another one we could have, is like glass special or glass architectural, whatever you want to call it. So this first one is just a normal glass, nothing too different. But if I grab something down here, if I zoom in, you can see, hopefully you can see it, that it just added this really cool type of architectural glass in there. Like it has like these different panels, it has these bubbles in the glass. Here's another one. So this is a frosted with like this wavy pattern in it. This is the ripple glass. So again, doing interiors like a bathroom shower, wall or something like that, whatever it is. I mean, there's all these cool different kinds of glasses that we can do. Yeah, so it's just something to be aware of, that there's basic glass and then there's these architectural glass, and you can make it whatever you want. And just like everything else, there's sliders that you can control those parameters even further, especially the scale. Maybe the scale looks really good, or you want the scale to be much bigger, or you want the scale to be much smaller. Whatever it is, you can just control all that stuff pretty quickly. Something like, say, this shutter that has this green on it. So I'm just gonna select this, and a lot of things, actually, you know what? Do I have something? Yeah, let me do this brick. This will be good. So if you have a SketchUp material and you don't, we can do one of 2 things. Sorry to back up. So if I click on this brick, I can go to outdoor brick, and I can select any one of these bricks, and it'll turn it into probably a nicer brick than what SketchUp has, because these are made and optimized for Lumion. You can see it changed my direction, which I'm not sure why it did, but even then, there are ways to change that. I think here you can adjust that kind of stuff. Here it is, orientation, the heading. So you can adjust the heading if I want to make it back to what I want. So you can adjust, the way it's heading, and all that kind of stuff. Or if you really like the brick that you had, I can go back here to I can click on this, go back to the library, go back to custom. This red circle right here will erase the Lumion material we added on and go back to our original SketchUp material. So even though you've replaced your SketchUp material, the information is still embedded in the file, which is nice, if that makes sense. So here, if I wanted to make something a little nicer than just this JPEG, I would click on standard, and this just basically gives me control in creating my own custom material. As soon as I click on it, you see this becomes super reflective. You can even see the sky in it, which I don't want. And it's just because it's putting in mid-level parameters. So I'm going to, for brick, I don't want it to be glossy, so I'm going to take my glossy all the way down. My brick is not reflective, so I'm going to take reflectivity all the way down. Now, relief, it's flat right now, but if I want to see the mortar to be kind of sunken in and give this depth to the material, I can click on this right here, which on the fly, if you guys know, do you know anything about normal maps? They're used in 3D renderings where instead of modeling depth, you can actually create an underlying JPEG that the rendering program will extrapolate and create depth. And I'm sure you guys have seen them. Maps. I mean, they look like this. So if this would just be a steel plate that would have a JPEG that matches it, but when you put this underlying 3D-esque type of image underneath it, all it does is give height to it. In fact, not to go too far off topic, this will really show it. So you can actually, this is a way to create your own normal maps, but this will really show it. So this would be, this ripple here is like, say, the JPEG image. This is the normal map, and then here, if I zoom in, you can see the depth that it's adding to the model. Even though it's not modeled, the rendering program is adding that depth. So that's what a normal map does. With that said, Lumion will create a normal map on the fly by clicking this button. And when you click it, it actually flips it and does it the wrong way. So you have to click it a second time, and that'll do it the right way. And so if I add relief, if I pull this all the way up, and if I get the sun in just the right way, you would really start to see that depth. And it actually renders much nicer. So you see the shadow lines that it's creating here. If I go back to edit this material and I get rid of the relief, you can see it's flat again. And so this is just a way to add 3D capability, or 3D aspect to your materials. Scale is just scale. It is what it is. Some other fun, quick things before we end for the day, and we'll definitely get into more of this next time. Down here, here's some more advanced stuff. Again, you can change the position. I think because it's my own, it can't. Let's see here, orientation. Transparency, I can make this a transparent material if I wanted to. And you can actually see the ocean underneath, which is kind of funny. But this is great because this makes it more like a cloth material, and we'll get into that. You can actually make curtains that are see-through, which are similar to what this is showing. Under settings, you can make this an emissive material, and so this will start glowing. And if I turn the sun all the way down, you can see that my sidewalk is now glowing. And where this really typically comes in, materials, let me turn emissive off, is I have in my lights, and these are actually modeled into my light file. Let me make this class just so we can see in it. I have light bulbs inside of all of my lights, and you can see that in SketchUp, this is a material called lighting emissive material. So if I select this and just make it a standard material, and make it emissive, I now have light bulbs that are on in my lights, in my sconces. So if I zoom out, all of my lights are now on. And if I turn my sun off, you know, my lights are on. So you know, I probably get very preachy when I talk about this stuff, but this is why from the very beginning, like when I create components, when I do certain layers, it's all for a very specific end game to make my life easier at the end. You know, my lights are all modeled with emissive materials. All this stuff kind of has all these things built in that I've dealt with these issues in the past, and I'm like, you know what, I can make my life easier to where I take a little bit of time up front and make things so much easier in the back. So even though SketchUp will never use this emissive material per se, it's built into it already, and you don't have to do any extra work, but yet here I have working lights in my model without doing a whole lot. We'll get into lights next week because there's a whole lot we can do with that, which is a lot of fun. Yeah, we can get into more custom materials next week as well. I mean, really, this whole thing is all about materials and how good your materials are really lend to how good your model is going to be. Just a couple other quick ones, like my railing is, I always like using this kind of charcoal kind of color. But it's nice if you select that. And again, it's selecting everything. If you see all my shutters, all my hardware is the same material, my lights are the same material. You know, but if you brought in, if you have somehow DW, you know, this is actually door, window, hardware, metal. And if you accidentally make a second one that's 0, 1, then these would not all be coordinated. And that's why it's so important to have a clean model. So if I select this and go to, I actually like using the indoor metals better than the outdoor metals. And I'm gonna, let's see, there's a wrought iron somewhere. Let's see, or iron. There we go. So I'm gonna make this an iron material. Now I think the iron comes out way too reflective. Where is it? Reflectivity. I'm gonna turn my reflectivity way down. You know, maybe it's glossy and that's fine. I'm gonna make the color a little darker. And then what's actually kind of neat, if I zoom in on this a little bit more, one of the settings here is I can weather this. So I'm going to say that this is an iron, and you see as I start to weather it, just by pulling the slider up, it starts making it rusty. You know, I can make it really rusty and moldy. You know, but the idea is, you know, if you add just the ever so slightest hint of weathering to some of this stuff, it just starts adding this other level of detail that you're not necessarily seeing, but it just makes it feel so much more real. And that's kind of, you know, the idea. So again, all of my metal just now changed. You know, my wood here, I can come in and just grab a wood. Although this one I had to actually just do my own standard material, knock off the gloss and reflectivity, and I would just add a relief to it so the grain really shows through. But all of this kind of stuff, which is a stone, you know, you can make it any stone material you want. Maybe not that one though. I don't know. Like again, it's sometimes, you know, there's some good ones. If you can find a good Lumion material, use it because the Lumion materials are made for this stuff. But if you can't, it's easy enough just to import the SketchUp and turn it. Although what's nice too is this one's actually not bad. You know, it's just not the color I want. So I can actually come here to colorization and say I want to color it. And the higher up you go, the more it overlays a color. And then I can change the color here. So maybe I want this to be like a white stone. So even though the underlying is this gray, you know, there we go, we get a decent stone material, like a white stone material. So anyway, yeah, so that's the introduction of materials. We have a lot more to do with materials, which will be fun. And then we'll get into further landscaping and all that kind of stuff. So maybe we'll do materials and landscaping next week, and then do the week after that, we'll get into setting up scenes and exporting and all that kind of stuff, making movies. All right, any questions? I know it's a lot, but it's fun stuff. Anyway, talk to you guys later.